Happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody. Nice to see you back again. I'm Darlene Merkler with Inland Caregiver Resource Center, and I'm here on Facebook Live every Tuesday and Thursday at noon with a 15-minute presentation for family caregivers. The topic that I'm going to be talking about this week, part one today, part two on Thursday, is it normal aging or dementia? You know, as we get older, we might misplace our keys and we think, oh my gosh, am I getting dementia? So hopefully I can help you with that today. First of all, we hear the words Alzheimer's and dementia quite a bit, and a lot of people think they mean the same thing, but they don't. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. So dementia is the umbrella term. There are many different types of dementia. We mostly hear about Alzheimer's because that accounts for 60% of all the dementias. And I'm going to talk about some other kinds of dementias, just a couple of them. There are many, but three of the ones most leading dementias that you hear about is, first of all, multi-infarct dementia. That's a type of dementia that happens to someone that has a stroke. Not everyone that has a stroke gets that, but the person who does, that's the type of dementia it is. And just to give you an example, the difference between that type of dementia and Alzheimer's disease is more like a slope where you're constantly just losing memory. Multi-infarct dementia is a little different because you could have a perfectly healthy brain, the person has a stroke, and boom, they lose some memory loss. And it's more like a stair step. They stay at that level of memory loss until or if they ever have another stroke. They could have a little mini stroke and then boom, they lose a little bit more memory. Then it goes on like that. So if they have one stroke and that's it, that's all the memory they're going to lose. So that's multi-infarct dementia. There's another type of dementia called Lewy body dementia. And that one is, some of the symptoms are similar to Parkinson's disease. You've probably heard of Parkinson's disease. Not all people with Parkinson's disease have memory loss, but the symptoms in Lewy body dementia are similar to Parkinson's in that there are involuntary body movements. The person may shuffle their feet and things like that. And then, of course, there is memory loss. The third type that I want to talk about is frontal temporal dementia. And that affects the front temporal part of the brain. And that is where we house our filtering system. So if a person has frontal temporal dementia, they may exhibit inappropriate behavior or language. For instance, you've heard of people describe their family member as this sweet little old lady who went to church every day of her life and never said a cuss word in her life and got frontal temporal dementia, and now she cusses like a sailor. You know, so it's very different behavior for the person because there's no filter for them. The next thing that I want to talk about is the stages of Alzheimer's disease. And I'm going to use the same model that the Alzheimer's Association uses, which is 3 stages: early, middle, and late stages. And I'm going to give you some of the symptoms that occur during each stage. First of all, let me say that there's no one cookie cutter way to say an Alzheimer's patient in the first 6 months is going to behave like this, and then in the next year like that. Everybody is different. They have their own personalities, and it also depends on what part of the brain is being affected as to what losses they experience at what time. So you may hear me talk about something in the late stage that maybe your loved one is experiencing now. That doesn't mean they're in the late stage. Like I said, it just depends. This is just a general guideline that the Alzheimer's Association uses. So the other thing I want to say is in the early stage, I always say the early stage is hardest on the person with the disease, whereas the middle and late stage are hardest on the family. And the reason for that is because in the early stage, the person with the memory loss knows that they are losing their memory. They may not be able to put their finger on what it is, but they know that something is not right. And so they struggle in that first stage. And usually, I would say like 80% of the cases are not diagnosed in the early stage. It's usually the middle stage, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But when the memory loss starts to affect a person's daily performance, that's one of the signs in the early stage. Also, confusion about place and time. Anything that has to do with numbers, like time or money, those numbers are one of the first things that are lost in the first stage of Alzheimer's disease. You never want to tell a person with Alzheimer's at 10 o'clock in the morning, we have a 2 o'clock doctor's appointment, because they probably don't have a concept of time, and they're going to be very anxious. Is it time to go? Should we go? Is it time to go? I don't want to be late, kind of behavior, because the numbers are just not there for the person in the early stages. You might notice some mood and personality changes. I think if I realized that I was starting to forget things and I kept making mistakes, that I'd probably have mood and personality changes also. The person in the early stages may show poor judgment. Again, that comes back to money, like not paying the bills or paying the bill twice, things like that. The middle stage, which can last 5 to 7 years as an average. Alzheimer's disease can last up to 25 years, anywhere between 5 and 25 years. Again, that depends on when it's diagnosed. A lot of times the person is diagnosed and the family says, oh my gosh, that's why 5 years ago mom was doing this or dad was doing that, and then you remember that there were little subtle things that started happening. So in the middle stage, the person may have difficulty writing or speaking. And again, I've seen people up through the end of life with Alzheimer's disease still have those abilities. The person might require direction in dressing, bathing, grooming. But let me say that the more you do for a person with Alzheimer's disease, the faster they lose that skill. So I know as caregivers, it's so much easier to say, oh, come on, let me just put that shirt on you and button you, or let me shower you. It takes a lot more patience and a lot more time to give the person one cue at a time. In the shower, they lose sequencing ability. So they forget that you get wet first, you put the soap on, then you wash. And so we have to give them one step at a time. Same thing with putting a shirt on, putting pants on, things like that. So just remember to allow yourself enough time so that they can do it themselves. There will be days when they're just not going to want to do it themselves, and that's fine. But for the most part, we should allow them to do as much for themselves as they can. The person may become suspicious, agitated, or aggressive. And I worked in an Alzheimer's assisted living for 8 years, and I saw a lot of people who would move in and they would be so confused. They had lived in the same house for 50 years and say, I don't know why I'm here. My son put me here. I need to go back to my house. I need to pay my bills. And they're very frustrated and scared, and they may become angry, and they may even become aggressive because they don't understand what's going on. They may have problems recognizing close friends or family. This is why I say the middle and late stage is harder on the family. I know the first time that your loved one doesn't recognize who you are, and some days they may recognize and some days they don't. They may for a moment recognize who you are and then they don't. But that's very hurtful for the family. They may exhibit repetitive motions or statements, and the reason for that is because it's more familiar to them. I'll give you an example. The Alzheimer's community where I worked had an adult daycare program, and this lady would bring her husband in a couple of days a week, and we'd say, hi, how are you? Well, and immediately he'd say, better than nothing. And his wife said that that was a joke that he used to say all the time when people say, how are you? And that was something that he could recall off the top of his head. I do another presentation about communication with dementia, and it takes 30 seconds for someone with dementia to hear the question you're asking them, understand it, and formulate an answer. And 30 seconds doesn't seem like much, but we're a very impatient society. And so when someone doesn't answer right away, we ask another question, and that just makes it even more confusing for the person. So the movements, a lot of times you'll see people with Alzheimer's rubbing the surfaces, like on a desk or a table, maybe even the wall. We had a lady who, when she would walk down the hall, she was constantly rubbing the walls. We did find out later that she was a school teacher, and we thought, well, maybe she was remembering erasing the boards. But they do like feeling different textures, rubbing surfaces and things like that. And then that happens in the middle stage. They may see or hear things that are not there, hallucinations. Sometimes that's caused by medication, sometimes by the disease. They may confuse daytime and nighttime. You've probably heard of sundowners. As the sun goes down, sometimes patients with Alzheimer's become more agitated. Some assisted living communities have tried to deal with that by putting skylights in their ceiling, even using certain colors of paint that have been proven to be more calming to people with Alzheimer's. We had people that lived at the community where I worked that were up all night and slept all day. They completely had it reversed. So that can happen. Also, the person may become incontinent at this time. So the part of the brain that tells them, gives them that sensation that they have to go to the restroom, is not there anymore, and so they become incontinent. The last stage is it says that the person's unable to communicate with words. Sometimes they can, but for the most part, they're not communicating in the last stage. And also, at this point, they don't recognize family or themselves in a mirror. And I had never experienced the mirror thing until I was working in this community. My office was next door to a resident's room, and one day I heard her saying, "Get out of here, get out of here." And I thought, oh no, because sometimes another resident would go into the room, and then an argument would pursue. So I thought, better go check this out. So I went in there, and she was standing in front of the bathroom mirror saying, "Get out of here, get out of here." And she did not recognize herself. And that can be very frightening for someone with Alzheimer's disease because they think it's another person. And of course, they're remembering themselves 20, 30, 40 years ago, not at the age that they look now. This doesn't happen to everybody, but it is something that can happen. I always tell caregivers, if you have mirrors in the home and this is happening, you want to either take the mirrors down or cover them up. The person may have difficulty with seizures, swallowing, and skin breakdown. Those are all things that really happen as a normal part of aging, but the swallowing mechanism is directed from the brain. And so when that shuts down and they can't swallow, then the family has a difficult decision of, do we put a feeding tube in to feed the person because they can't swallow? Do we prolong this quality of life? And that's something that's very personal and that each family needs to make on their own. The person may not be able to walk at this point, and they may sleep a lot more. So that's the first half. On Thursday, I'm going to be talking more about some of the behaviors that Alzheimer's patients have and how we should react to those behaviors. I just want to close by saying that Inland Caregiver Resource Center has all of their services up and running. We are doing counseling, case management. We are doing the Facebook Live in English and Spanish. Spanish will be tomorrow, Wednesday. We post all this on Facebook also. And we just had today our first 1 hour, what we call toolbox class, which is just a 1 hour presentation. I'll be doing one next week on this same topic. So I'll be going into more detail on Alzheimer's and dementia. And we also have, we are working with Instacart, and we can shop for groceries and pay for them and have them delivered to either family caregivers or seniors over 60. So if you have any questions about our services, please visit our website, inlandcaregivers.org, or send me a message here on Facebook. We want to be of service to our community, and we've been helping so many people, and I'm so proud to be part of this organization. So I hope you'll join me on Thursday for the second half of Is It Normal Aging or Dementia? Have a great day. Bye.